My father-in-law said I wasn't man enough to provide for his daughter. So I asked him one question at dinner. How much is your mortgage payment? He told me proudly. I smiled. I've been paying it for 2 years. Your daughter asked me not to tell you. His face went white. Richard's voice carried across the entire dining room when he said it. Some men build empires. Some men just swing hammers. He was looking directly at me, smiling, like it was a joke we were all supposed to laugh at. 12 people at the table. My wife Emily, our 2 kids, Sophie, 12, and Jake, 9, Richard's wife Margaret, Emily's brother Daniel and his wife, Emily's sister Claire, a few cousins whose names I could never remember, all of them watching, waiting to see how I'd react. I'd been reacting the same way for 8 years. Smile, nod, change the subject. Let Richard feel superior, because it was easier than fighting, easier than watching Emily get caught in the middle, easier than explaining things that would only make everything worse. But tonight was different. Tonight, Sophie looked at me with something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not quite pity, not quite embarrassment, something worse, like she was wondering if maybe Grandpa was right, like maybe her dad really was just some guy who swung hammers while other men built empires. And Jake had stopped eating, just sat there with his fork halfway to his mouth, frozen, waiting to see if Dad was going to defend himself or if Grandpa was going to win again. Richard took a long sip of his wine, clearly enjoying himself. I'm just saying, Emily deserves someone with real ambition, someone who thinks bigger than the next paycheck. Emily's hand found mine under the table, squeezed hard, the universal signal for please don't make this worse. But I was done making things better by staying quiet. I set down my fork, looked Richard straight in the eyes. Richard, I said, my voice calm and steady. What's your mortgage payment? The table went silent. Richard blinked. What? Your monthly mortgage payment on this house. I gestured around at the dining room, the vaulted ceilings, the custom built-ins he'd bragged about when they bought the place 6 years ago. How much is it? I don't see what that has to do with humor me. You're questioning my ambition. I'm just curious. How much do you pay every month? He glanced at Margaret. She was staring at her plate, face pale, shoulders tense. She knew. Of course she knew. $3,400, Richard said finally, puffing out his chest. Not that you'd understand numbers like that. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, turned the screen toward him. Look at the recipient address on these transactions. Richard leaned forward, squinting at the screen. I watched his face change. Confusion first, then recognition, then something that looked like physical pain. 24 monthly transactions, each one for $3,400, each one sent to 847 Maple Ridge Drive. His address. I've been paying your mortgage for 2 years, I said quietly, since the month after you lost your job and burned through your savings. Your daughter asked me not to tell you. She wanted to protect your pride. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. You've been living in my house, I continued, still calm, still steady. While calling me a failure in front of my children, I stood up, took Sophie's hand, then Jake's. Richard's mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. Just this gasping, fish-out-of-water movement that might have been funny if my kids weren't watching their grandfather realize his entire worldview had just collapsed. We're leaving, I said to Emily. She was crying, but she stood up too. We walked toward the front door, Richard's front door, the one I'd been paying for, the one that opened into the entryway I'd been financing, leading into the house I'd been keeping. Wait, Richard's voice finally found him. Jacob, wait, I turned around one last time. You spent 8 years telling me I wasn't good enough for your daughter. I spent 2 years making sure you had a roof over your head anyway. That's the difference between us, Richard. I looked at Margaret, who was openly weeping now. The payments will continue. You won't lose the house, but we're done with these dinners. Then I walked out. His front door. My front door. I'm Jacob Torres, 36 years old, and I've been in construction since I was 17. Not because I couldn't do anything else. Not because I lacked ambition or education or options, but because I loved it. The satisfaction of building something real, something that would stand long after I was gone, something people would use and live in and make memories inside. My father had been a contractor, so was his father. I grew up on job sites, learning to frame walls before I could drive, understanding load-bearing calculations before I understood algebra. By the time I graduated high school, I had more practical skills than most college graduates. I started my own company at 25, Torres Construction. 1 truck, 1 employee, me, and a business loan for $50,000 that terrified me every single day. The first year, I made $34,000, barely covered expenses and loan payments, lived in a studio apartment that was really just a converted garage, ate ramen 4 nights a week. The second year, I made $67,000, hired my first employee, my cousin Miguel, who needed work and knew his way around a job site. The third year, I made $94,000 and hired 2 more guys, started bidding on bigger jobs, commercial contracts, small office renovations, a few custom homes for people with more money than patience. By the time I was 30, I had 40 employees and a reputation for quality work that came in on time and under budget. By 35, I was clearing 7 figures annually and bidding on projects I couldn't have imagined 10 years earlier. High-rise renovations downtown, exposed brick loft conversions, custom homes for tech executives who wanted something unique. unique, government contracts for municipal buildings, but I still wore work boots, still had calloused hands, still showed up at job sites covered in sawdust because I couldn't run a company I didn't understand from the ground up, and Richard hated every single thing about me from the moment we met. I met Emily at a coffee shop near a job site 8 years ago. I ducked in to get something caffeinated during a lunch break, still wearing my work clothes, still covered in drywall dust. She was sitting at a corner table with her laptop, working on something that had her completely absorbed. I ordered my coffee, turned to leave, bumped directly into her as she stood up to get a refill. Her laptop went flying. Coffee went everywhere. I caught the laptop before it hit the ground, but not before coffee soaked the front of my shirt. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." She was horrified, grabbing napkins, trying to clean up the mess. "It's okay. Occupational hazard. I'm used to being covered in stuff." She looked at me, really looked at me, and something sparked. "You're a contractor?" "Yeah, Torres Construction." "You own it?" "Started it 7 years ago." Her eyes lit up. "That's incredible. I work in nonprofit management. I'm always trying to find local contractors for our housing projects." We talked for 45 minutes. I was late getting back to the job site. Didn't care. We went to dinner 3 days later. She told me about her work with affordable housing initiatives. I told her about the builds I loved and the ones I hated. We discovered we both wanted the same things: to build something meaningful, to leave the world a little better than we found it. I proposed 6 months later. She said yes before I finished asking. Her family came to meet me 2 weeks after that. Richard Henderson was 57 years old, vice president of operations at a regional manufacturing company, and convinced that manual labor was for people who'd failed at everything else. "Construction," he said, when Emily told him what I did, his voice dripping with barely concealed contempt. "That's nice. Is that something you're doing while you figure out a real career?" "It is my real career. I own the company." "Oh." He said it like I'd told him I collected unemployment. "Well, everyone has to start somewhere." Emily's mother, Margaret, was kinder, but you could see the disappointment in her eyes too. Their daughter, graduate of a good university, director at a respected nonprofit, from a family of lawyers and executives and accountants, was marrying a guy who showed up to dinner with dirt under his fingernails. At our engagement party, Richard cornered me by the bar, leaned in close, whiskey on his breath, and said, "She could have done better, you know. Emily's got options. She's settling." He smiled like it was a joke, a little ribbing between men, just having fun. It wasn't fun. It was a warning. At our wedding, he told anyone who'd listen that I'd figure out a real career eventually. Made sure to mention, multiple times, that Emily made almost as much as me, which was a lie. I made nearly 3 times her salary, but he didn't know that, and I didn't correct him. Every holiday after that, every birthday, every family dinner, Richard found new ways to remind me I wasn't good enough. "When you getting a desk job? Emily deserves someone with ambition. Must be nice having a wife who actually earns money." Emily would squeeze my hand under the table, whisper apologies later. "He's just old-fashioned. He doesn't understand what you do." But it wasn't about understanding. It was about control, about making sure I knew my place in his family hierarchy, about punishing me for not being the son-in-law he'd imagined. And I let him. For years I let him, because fighting back meant hurting Emily, and I loved her more than I hated him. 2 years ago, everything changed. It was a Tuesday night, around 11:30 p.m., when Emily's phone rang, Margaret's name on the screen. Emily answered, listened for maybe 30 seconds, then her face went white. "We'll be right there." She hung up, looked at me with tears already forming. "Dad lost his job. They're in trouble." We drove to their house, the house Richard had bought 6 years earlier, the house he'd bragged about constantly, the 3,400 square foot colonial with the 2-car garage and the professionally landscaped yard that screamed, "Successful man lives here." Margaret met us at the door, crying. "He didn't tell me for 3 months. I found the foreclosure notice in his briefcase." The story came out in pieces. Richard's company had downsized, 30-year employees let go with 2 weeks severance. He'd been so certain he'd find another position immediately, a man with his experience, his track record, that he'd kept spending like nothing had changed. 3 months of unemployment, 3 months of burning through savings to maintain appearances, 3 months of missed mortgage payments while he pretended everything was fine. Now they were behind $1,200, facing foreclosure in 90 days, and Richard's pride wouldn't let him admit it to anyone. He was upstairs when we arrived, in his study, door locked. Margaret said he'd been in there for 6 hours. Emily went up to talk to him. I heard muffled voices, then shouting, then silence. She came back down 20 minutes later. "He won't ask anyone for help. He says he'd rather lose the house than admit he failed." "What about your brother, your sister?" "Daniel just bought his own house. Claire's still paying off student loans. They don't have this kind of money." She looked at me, didn't say anything, didn't have to. "How much do they need?" I asked. $10,000 to clear the arrears, then $3,400 a month until he finds work. I did the math in my head. It was manageable. Not easy, but manageable. I'd just closed on 2 major contracts. Cash flow was good. "I can do it. Jacob, I can do it. But there's a condition. He can't know it's from me." Emily understood immediately. "If he knew you were helping him, he'd refuse. Or worse, he'd take the money and resent me for it. Probably both. So what do we do?" I thought about it for a moment. "We set up an anonymous payment system, some kind of trust or charity charity program, something that protects his pride while keeping the roof over his head. Patricia Morrison was an estate planning attorney I'd worked with on some legal issues for the company. 26 years of experience, sharp as a knife, and discreet about client confidentiality. What you're describing is absolutely doable, she said when I explained what I needed. We create a legal entity, a trust, essentially, that makes the payments on their behalf. The bank doesn't care who pays as long as the money comes. We can structure it so the source remains anonymous. What story do we tell them? That's up to you. Some kind of charitable assistance program, maybe. Something believable. I chose a church-based charity program. Margaret attended St. Mary's Catholic Church every Sunday. It was plausible that they had some kind of emergency assistance fund for parishioners in crisis. Patricia drew up the paperwork. I funded the trust with enough to clear the arrears and cover 6 months of payments. Set up automatic transfers. Made sure every transaction was documented properly in case we ever needed proof. Then I had Patricia's paralegal, a woman named Susan, who'd never met Richard and had no connection to our family, call Margaret and explain that St. Mary's Emergency Assistance Fund had received an anonymous donation earmarked specifically for families facing housing insecurity. Someone wanted to help, Susan told Margaret. We can't disclose who, but they've covered your past due amount and 6 months of future payments. After that, we'll reassess based on your husband's employment situation. Margaret called Emily, sobbing with relief. It's a miracle, an actual miracle. Someone at church knew we were struggling and they helped us. Richard's version was different. He told everyone at the next family dinner about his old colleague from the company who'd made a fortune in real estate investments and wanted to pay it forward to families affected by the downsizing. Made himself the hero of the story, the guy whose loyalty and friendship had inspired such generosity. Emily and I sat there and said nothing. Let him have his dignity. Let him believe whatever story made him feel less like a failure. And every month, $3,400 left my account and went into the trust that paid his mortgage. 24 months, $52,800. His address, my money, and the insults kept coming. Thanksgiving, first year. Still doing manual labor? I always figured you'd move into management eventually. Christmas, first year. Emily mentioned you worked on Christmas Eve. That's rough. Must be hard not having vacation time. Easter, second year. You know, my nephew just made partner at his law firm. 32 years old. Some people just have that drive. Summer barbecue, second year. I'm thinking about buying a boat. Once I'm working again, of course. Though I guess you wouldn't understand that kind of purchase. Every single time, Emily would apologize later. He doesn't mean it. He's still stressed about the job situation. Once he's working again, but he wasn't working again. 57 years old, let go without warning, in an industry that wanted younger and cheaper. Every interview ended the same way. We'll keep your resume on file. His unemployment ran out. His savings evaporated. The trust I'd funded kept his house, kept him fed and warm and comfortable, while he sat in his study sending out resumes and telling everyone who'd listen that I lacked ambition. I could have told him, could have printed out the bank statements and shoved them in his face, could have made him look at the evidence of his own failure and my success. But Emily begged me not to. He's fragile right now. The truth would break him. Please, Jacob, just a little longer. So I stayed quiet. Let him feel superior. Let him think I was just some guy with calloused hands who'd never amount to anything. Until tonight. Until he looked at my 12-year-old daughter and questioned whether her father was good enough. Until he made my 9-year-old son wonder if maybe Grandpa was right. That's when quiet stopped being an option. The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Sophie was in the back seat, staring out the window. Jake was playing some game on his phone, but not really paying attention. Emily sat in the passenger seat with tears running down her face. Finally, Sophie spoke. Dad, is it true? Have you really been paying Grandpa's mortgage? Yes. For 2 years? Yes. Why didn't you tell us? I glanced at Emily. She nodded slightly. Permission to explain. Because your grandfather is proud. He lost his job and it hurt him. Your mom and I wanted to help without making him feel bad about needing help. But he was mean to you. All the time. And you helped him anyway? Yes. Why? That was harder to answer. Because family helps family? Because Emily asked me to? Because keeping the peace was easier than fighting? None of those felt true anymore. I don't know, sweetheart. I think I was wrong to stay quiet for so long. Jake piped up from the back. Grandpa said you weren't successful. But you are, right? Your company is big. Yeah, buddy. The company's doing well. So why did he think you weren't? Because I never told him. I let him think what he wanted to think because it was easier than proving him wrong. Emily finally spoke, her voice thick with tears. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I asked you to keep it secret and I shouldn't have. I should have let you tell him from the beginning. You were trying to protect your father. I was enabling him. There's a difference. She wiped her eyes. He's been cruel to you for 8 years, and I asked you to just take it. What kind of wife does that? The kind who loves her father. That's not a crime. It is when that father is tearing down your husband, when he's making your kids question whether their dad is successful, when he's using your money to keep his house while insulting the man who's keeping him afloat. She was right about all of it. We pulled into our driveway, the driveway of the house I'd built myself. Custom home on 2 acres designed specifically for our family, worth probably triple what Richard's house was worth. What happens now? Sophie asked. I don't know yet. My phone started buzzing around 10 p.m. Text from Margaret. Jacob, please. He didn't know. He's devastated. Please call me. Text from Daniel, Emily's brother. What the hell just happened? Mom's hysterical. Dad won't come out of his study. Text from Claire. Is it true? Have you really been paying their mortgage? Then, around midnight, one from Richard. We need to talk. I didn't respond to any of them that night. Just sat on my back porch with a beer, looking at the stars, trying to figure out if I regretted what I'd done. I didn't. Maybe I should have handled it privately. Maybe I should have pulled Richard aside, shown him the evidence quietly, given him a chance to process without an audience. But he'd chosen to humiliate me publicly for 8 years. Seemed fair that the truth came out the same way. Emily came out around 1 a.m., wrapped in a blanket, and sat next to me. My dad's here, in the driveway. He's been sitting in his car for 20 minutes. Do you want me to talk to him? I want you to do whatever feels right to you. You've been doing what I wanted for 2 years. Tonight's your call. I finished my beer, stood up, walked around to the front of the house. Richard was sitting in his car, a 2011 Toyota Camry with 180,000 miles on it, the car he'd been driving since before he lost his job because he couldn't afford to replace it, with the engine off and the windows down. I walked over, leaned against the door. You want to come inside? He shook his head, couldn't look at me. I came to apologize. I don't expect you to accept it. I needed to say it, okay? I've been a bastard to you for 8 years because you weren't what I wanted for my daughter, because you worked with your hands and I thought that meant you weren't smart enough, successful enough, good enough. He finally looked at me. His eyes were red, swollen, and the whole time, you were the one keeping me afloat. You were the one making sure I didn't lose everything. You were better than I deserved and I treated you like garbage. Yeah, you did. Margaret showed me everything. The trust documents, the payment history, the legal structure you built so I could keep my pride while you paid my bills. His voice cracked. Why? Why would you do that for someone who treated you so badly? Because Emily asked me to. Because you're her father and she loves you. Because I'm not the kind of person who lets someone lose their house just because they're an asshole. He flinched at the word, but didn't argue. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I don't deserve forgiveness. I just want you to know that I understand now. What I did, what you did, the difference between us. Do you? You built something real. Something that matters. Something that helps people and employs people and makes the world slightly better. And I spent 8 years tearing you down for it because it wasn't what I understood. Because it made me feel small. He took a shaky breath. I'm sorry for all of it. For tonight. For the past 8 years. For making your kids question whether their father was worth respecting. I was wrong about everything. I stood there for a long moment, looking at this man who'd made my life miserable, who'd questioned my worth at every opportunity, who was now sitting in his car at 1 a.m. because he couldn't sleep with the weight of his own shame. The payments will continue, I said finally. You won't lose your house, but we're done with the family dinners. Done with the holidays where you use me as a punching bag to make yourself feel better. Done pretending we're okay when we're not. I understand. If you want to rebuild this relationship, if you want to earn back the right to be at my table, around my kids, you're going to have to show me you've changed. Not tell me. Show me. How do I do that? That's not my problem to solve, Richard. You spent 8 years figuring out new ways to insult me. You can spend some time figuring out how to make it right. I walked back toward my house, stopped, turned around. One more thing. The trust is being restructured as a loan. Interest-free, payments deferred until you're employed. But it'll be documented. Official. No more charity. No more anonymous gifts. Just debt you'll pay back when you can. That's more than fair. It's not about fair. It's about making sure everyone knows where things stand. No more secrets. No more protected pride. Just the truth. I went inside, heard his car start up a few minutes later, watched through the window as he drove away. Emily was standing in the doorway. You okay? No, but I will be. 6 months later, Richard found a job. Not the executive position he'd held before. Nothing close. He was a supply chain manager at a mid-sized distribution company, making about 60% of his previous salary, working under people 10 years younger than him. He took it anyway, swallowed his pride, started showing up at 7 a.m. and staying until the work was done. His first paycheck, he called me. I want to start paying you back. I can't do the full amount yet, but I can do $500 a month. Is that acceptable? That's acceptable. The first check arrived a week later, handwritten, not a bank transfer or online payment. Actual check with his actual signature. It felt intentional, like he wanted me to physically hold the evidence of his repayment. I deposited it. Every month after that, another one came, always on time, always exactly $500. We didn't do family dinners anymore, but Emily saw her parents occasionally, lunch with her mom, coffee with her dad. She said he asked about me every time, asked how the business was doing, asked if the kids were okay, never pushed to be invited back, never complained about being excluded, just accepted the consequences of his actions and kept paying his debt. 2 years later, 4 years since I'd started paying his mortgage, 2 years since that Thanksgiving dinner, Richard showed up at one of Jake's baseball games. He didn't sit with us, sat 3 rows back by himself, wearing a company polo shirt with his new employer's logo, watched the whole game in silence. After the final out, Jake ran over to us, glowing from his team's win, saw his grandfather standing awkwardly quietly at the edge of the bleachers. Grandpa, did you see my hit? Richard's face transformed. I saw it. That was incredible. Jake looked at me, checking if it was okay, if Grandpa was allowed to be there. I nodded. Jake hugged his grandfather. Richard looked like he might cry. After the game, Richard approached me carefully. I hope it's okay that I came. Jake mentioned it when Emily brought the kids over for lunch. I wanted to see him play. It's okay. I've paid back $18,000 so far. I know it's not everything yet, but I wanted you to know I'm committed to this, to making it right. I know. And I wanted to say, he paused, choosing words carefully, I'm proud of you, of what you've built, of the father you are, of the man my daughter married. I should have said it 8 years ago, but I'm saying it now. Emily came over with Sophie, saw her father. Her face softened slightly. Hi, Dad. Hi, sweetheart. They stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Emily said, we're getting pizza after this. You could join us, if you want. Richard looked at me, asking permission. Pizza sounds good, I said. It took 3 more years for Richard to pay me back completely. $63,800, every penny I'd paid on his mortgage. The final check arrived on a Tuesday morning, along with a letter. Jacob, this is the last payment. Everything I owed you, paid in full. I know money doesn't fix what I did. I know you helped me not because you wanted gratitude, but because that's who you are. But I needed to close this debt, needed to prove to you and to myself that I could make it right. You saved my family when I was too proud to save myself. You protected my dignity even when I didn't deserve it. You showed me what it actually means to be a man, not by talking about it, but by living it. Thank you for everything, but especially for not giving up on us completely, for giving me the chance to earn my way back into your family's life. I won't waste it. Richard, I put the check and letter in my safe, didn't frame it or display it, just kept it as a reminder that people can change, given enough time and enough consequences.